Can Kenny solve the Kira case? Let's talk about it. Well, first, let's say that for Kenny to merge Japan with Tengen, he needs to beat Kira, and in this scenario, he will be taking L's place. The Kira case is one of the hardest mysteries in anime history. Light Yagami managed to outsmart entire police forces, manipulate world governments, and even defeat L himself. But what if instead of L, the person hunting Kira was Kenjaku? At first glance, Kenjaku seems like an unusual choice. He's not a detective. He's a 1,000-year-old sorcerer and mastermind whose greatest weapon isn't power, it's information. Throughout Jujutsu Kaisen, Kenjaku spends centuries preparing plans that involve thousands of people. He manipulated curses, sorcerers, governments, and even entire generations without revealing his true identity. That level of patience is exactly what the Kira case demands. The moment criminals around the world start dying of heart attacks, Kenjaku would immediately understand that something supernatural is involved. Unlike L, who had to slowly prove that Kira wasn't using conventional methods, Kenjaku already lives in a world where impossible abilities exist. He wouldn't waste time searching for scientific explanations. His first objective would be narrowing down Kira's location. Just like L, Kenjaku would notice that Kira requires information about his victims. Criminals whose names and faces are publicly available die far more often than those whose identities remain hidden. That tells him the killer has specific conditions that must be met before a victim can be targeted. The famous Lind L. Taylor trap would still work. Once the fake detective dies, Kenjaku learns that Kira is located in Japan and can kill remotely. However, unlike L, Kenjaku wouldn't reveal himself afterward. He prefers operating from the shadows. This is where things become dangerous for Light. Kenjaku's greatest advantage is body hopping. By transplanting his brain into another body, he can gain access to the host's memories, abilities, and identity while remaining almost impossible to detect. Imagine Kenjaku secretly possessing a police officer working on the Kira investigation. Suddenly, he has access to confidential reports, investigation updates, and the list of suspects. If necessary, he could abandon that body and move to another person entirely. Light's greatest strength was his ability to gather information from inside the task force through his father. Kenjaku could do the exact same thing, but on a much larger scale. As the investigation continues, Kenjaku would notice a suspicious pattern. The people with the most access to police information are connected to the families of investigators. That immediately places Light among the potential suspects. But unlike L, Kenjaku wouldn't confront Light directly. Kenjaku understands that information is power. If Light realizes he's being watched, he'll become more cautious. Instead, Kenjaku would quietly observe him for months. Every movement, every schedule change, every unusual coincidence. Soon, a pattern would emerge. Whenever Light gains access to new criminal information, more criminals die. That alone isn't enough evidence. But for Kenjaku, evidence isn't the goal. Confirmation is. And once he starts believing that Light is Kira, he begins setting a trap far more ruthless than anything L ever attempted. Because unlike L, Kenjaku has absolutely no issue sacrificing people if it helps him reach the truth. Once Kenjaku becomes convinced that Light is Kira, the investigation enters its most dangerous phase. Unlike L, Kenjaku wouldn't rush to arrest him. He already knows that Kira possesses an unknown supernatural weapon. Charging in without understanding that weapon would be reckless. Instead, he'd continue feeding Light false information. Fake criminals. Fake investigations. Fake suspects. If those targets keep dying, Kenjaku gains more and more confirmation that Light is somehow connected to the killings. Eventually, Kenjaku's attention shifts from Light himself to the method. Every ability has rules, and Kira's power is no exception. The victims die regardless of distance, yet Kira never needs physical contact. That means the source of the ability must be some kind of object or medium. This is where Light's biggest weakness appears, the Death Note. The notebook has to be hidden somewhere, accessed repeatedly, and protected at all costs. For all of Light's intelligence, he is still human. The more he uses the notebook, the more opportunities he creates for someone like Kenjaku to notice irregularities. After months of surveillance, hidden traps, and psychological pressure, Kenjaku would eventually force Light into a position where he needs to use the Death Note under observation. The moment Kenjaku discovers the notebook, the case is effectively over. But there is one final problem. Ryuk. Most humans cannot see Shinigami. However, Kenjaku is a jujutsu sorcerer who deals with supernatural entities regularly. Even if he cannot immediately perceive Ryuk, the notebook's cursed and unnatural nature would instantly draw his attention. The Death Note is far too strange to be dismissed as an ordinary object. Once Kenjaku understands that the notebook is the source, Light loses his greatest advantage: secrecy. Could Light still kill Kenjaku? Possibly. If Light learns Kenjaku's real name and writes it down before being exposed, he could win. The problem is that Kenjaku has survived for centuries by hiding his true identity. Most people don't even know who or what he really is. Light's usual strategy of learning a target's name becomes significantly harder. Meanwhile, Kenjaku only needs one successful operation, one stolen notebook, one moment of carelessness, one mistake, and Light is finished. In the end, Kenjaku probably solves the Kira case. Not because he's smarter than Light in raw intelligence, but because he is infinitely more patient. Light defeated opponents who thought in terms of weeks and months. Kenjaku thinks in terms of centuries. Against most detectives, Light wins. Against a 1,000-year-old mastermind whose entire life revolves around manipulation, secrecy, and long-term planning, the odds finally shift against Kira. Well, in this scenario, the biggest advantage for Kenny was his body swap technique, which gives him the memory and the abilities of the person. So, if Light uses Death Note against any detective like he did against Ray Pember, it will be over for him. Verdict: Kenjaku solves the Kira case around 7 out of 10 times. Follow for more content like this.